with you after the session ends. It's a 1 hour session for today. We'll split into 20 minutes for presentation and then 20 minutes for the demonstration on the application. And then the last 20 minutes, we'll keep it for questions and answers. We'd like to give as much time to answer your questions and feedback. So if you have any questions during the middle of the session, you're welcome to send your questions via chat, but we'll ensure to answer all of your questions at the Q&A session allocated during the last 20 minutes. With that, I'd like to introduce the panelists for today. With myself, Lakshmi Narayan Minno Srinivasan. I'm the EDGE product specialist. I've been with the EDGE team for almost 4 years now. I'm responsible for all the new product enhancements and changes that go into the EDGE application. I also closely monitor the user experience on the application. I see some of the attendees have trouble trying to connect your audio or video. If you have any trouble trying to connect your audio, please see that there is a separate audio button that you need to click. For users who are joining through mobile, you can click the phone icon and then try to choose the option that is relevant for you. For users using the computer, you need to click the option audio at the top. If you have any trouble to connect your audio, please send us a text via chat. One of us should be able to help you if you have trouble listening us. Coming back, I've been with the team for 4 years. With that, I'd like to ask Smita if you'd want to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Lakshmi. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Lakshmi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Smita.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Smita Chandra Thomas. My expertise is in building science, and I'm a consultant to the EDGE Green Buildings team. I've been attached to the technical team led by Omid Sabari for about 5 years now. I help with the global compliance policy for EDGE and the technical development of EDGE for the data that goes into it, among other things. I'll be monitoring the chat today, and please write your questions and we'll answer as many as we can at the end. Omid?
Hello, everyone. This is Omid Sabari. Pleased to be here and see familiar faces. I am EDGE Global Technical Lead for EDGE program. I've been with EDGE for the last 7 years now, and very pleased to talk today about the new version of EDGE. So what we want to discuss today is just to give you an overview of what has been changed. As Lakshmi mentioned, we are very thankful to all our EDGE experts around the world that helped us. Hundreds of you helped us to enable the new EDGE version 3. But you may ask why we are doing EDGE version 3. You know, we have EDGE version 1 that's been retired. There was EDGE version 2. And why do we need EDGE version 3? First of all, we have a policy under the Edge governance documents that we need to update the baseline every few years. And it was time for us to update the Edge global baseline. As you know, every time we update the baseline, it becomes more difficult to achieve Edge. And that's how we like to be. We want to make sure that always Edge standard is getting more and more up to date and provides more savings and more value to the clients and owners. We also updated the calculation engine. This is a big change for us, and you probably would say, why? Because a lot of our standards and calculation engine has been outdated, and we had new standards. We wanted to follow them. For example, we updated our ASHRAE standard to the latest ASHRAE standard of 2016. We also updated our ISO standard from 2008 to 2017 standard of ISO that makes our energy calculation more accurate. And then we also increased our transparency. The transparency has been always a flagship for Edge. We wanted to be more and more transparent and make sure that everything is very obvious to the user. And in terms of transparency, we are improving our baseline assumptions. If you remember, before, baseline assumptions were under the key assumptions for baseline, but some measures you couldn't see what is the baseline for some water measures or some energy measures. And now we have the baseline assumptions for every single measure. And then we also introduced new cost for each measure, which enables more transparency on the cost data as well. We improved the flexibility of the tool by increasing the number of measures. You will see it later when Smita presents. And we also added more calculators and more detailed inputs, which enables the user to build much more complex conditions within Edge, making Edge simple in the surface, but like an onion that you can peel in to it and add more and more details if you need to. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what are the key baseline changes? The key baseline changes has been, the main one was around HVAC baseline, switched from ASHRAE 90.1 2007 to 90.1 2016. This is creating a new condition for the HVAC systems. This is changed globally for all countries other than China, which has a specific baseline conditions for China. We also started increasing our certain technologies. For example, we know that LED lights are now being adopted in many countries, and it's becoming norm. Therefore, our baseline has switched to LED lighting. So for now, if you want to get savings on LED lighting, you need to get a specific type of LED lightings that they have higher lumen per watt efficiency. We also updated the local regulations around the world wherever it was applicable based on the feedback that we heard from the experts globally. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what is the timeline for Edge? The timeline for Edge version 3 has been, you probably have seen already in December 2020, we released the Edge version 3 as beta release. You have noticed that you can create projects, save projects, but you cannot register a project in version 3. That's because we want to collect feedback and make sure that our experts and clients are happy with Edge version 3 before enabling registration and certification. Our target is that by March 2021, we'll start enabling registrations and certification in Edge version 3. That enables the clients and our Edge experts that they are leaders. They want to move to Edge version 3 to start using Edge version 3 in their certifications. I'm very curious to see which project becomes the first Edge version 3 certified project. Hopefully one of you will make that happen. In July 21, we will start making Edge version 3 as the default version of Edge. Now, if you open the app, you see Edge version 2, and you go down to Edge version 3. Edge version 3 will become the default version. And in September, we are hoping tentatively to make version 3 mandatory for all new registrations. After that, we will not accept new registrations in version 2. So projects that are registered until December in version 2.1 would have time until December 2025 to achieve Edge version final certification. If a project is registered and by that time is not getting the final certification, that project needs to move to Edge version 3. Also, the other note is that the certification process for Edge version 3 will stay the same as Edge version 2. So that will make our auditors and experts' life easy because we are not changing that process. We can move to the next slide and pass the mic back to you, Lakshmi.
Thank you, Omid. So there are several changes we made in version 3. It's leaps and bounds ahead of version 2.1, but we stick our grounds to the roots. So the interface, it would look similar to 2.1. And we have retained the simplicity of version 2.1 in version 3, along with making it much more sophisticated. And there is a lot more flexibility, as Omid already mentioned. One of the items that we did was making the subtypes into primary building types. So you would notice one of the first impressions that you'd see on version 3 is you would see 11 different building types in the separate menu icon on the left. And we introduced a new building type for mixed use so that our users can model their self-defined building with their area breakdowns which are applicable for mixed use. We also removed apartments from homes and made it a primary building in version 3. Along the same lines, industrial has been separated from retail, which was part of retail in version 2.1. Resorts and serviced apartments have also been separated from hotels so that users can instantly identify these primary building types and they can start modeling within each of these building types. Version 3 is much more streamlined and more intuitive compared to version 2.1. One of the simplest things we did is to introduce the building types as a drop-down, and it's available as a first option when version 3 loads, so that users have the power in changing the building types without having to lose their draft inputs when they start modeling their building for the first time. We also have introduced multiple typologies for homes and apartments, where user can provide as many as 15 different typologies in a separate multiple typology overlay, specifically given for homes and apartments. Using the overlay, they can give the area breakdowns without having the need to create separate subprojects for each typology. Over to you, Smita.
Thanks, Lakshmi. I'll be highlighting a couple of points in the next 2 slides, and then I'll do a demo of version 3 before handing it back to Omid. So those of you who have already looked at version 3 may have noticed that it looks almost the same as version 2. But this is only, at first glance. As you dig into the actual measures and inputs, you'll see that there are many new features in version 3, which will become obvious as you start using the app. So one major change is that most measures are now available uniformly across different typologies. In version 2, the choice of measures was customized by typology. And as version 2 grew to add more and more building types, we were adding measures that were suitable for certain building types. Now in version 3, almost all those measures are available in all the typologies, except the ones that don't apply. So there are 3 examples of this. One, water-cooled chillers can now be modeled for residential buildings. So if you have an apartment building with a water-cooled chiller, you could select that. 2, more space types are available. So swimming pools and parking are available for all typologies. A third example of richer options is that users can now specify heating and cooling season by the month. Next slide, please. So speaking of richness, version 3 includes every country in the world. EDGE follows the World Bank protocol in naming countries. So when you're looking for a particular country, please keep that in mind. Another feature you'll discover is that many input panels, that is the panels in the app, now have detailed entry inputs. There are also new calculators, and we will continue to add more calculators as necessary. Next slide, please. So now let's take a look at some of these features that we just discussed in the app. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Smita, we're seeing your screen.
Okay. Lakshmi, could you actually give me a minute to log in and maybe we can. So I beg your pardon because the version 3 is richer, but it does take a little bit longer to load because of that. So you just be a minute here while I start the session again. All right. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second and bring it back. Sorry about that. All right, I have my screen up here. I'm going to try and share again. Do you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the first thing I'd like to point out is what Lakshmi mentioned, that we have a lot more building types that are available in the left-hand menu. So you have homes, and then under that, you separately have apartments. We have hotels and resorts separately. We have serviced apartments as a third type that used to be a subset of hospitality earlier. We have retail, and then we have industrial separately. We still have offices and healthcare, education, and then you have the mixed use. So this is a new type that allows you to model a mixed use building, which is quite exciting. You don't need to do a separate sub-projects for something like that. So for the demo today, I've used an apartment building. This is, as you can see, the panels have been, so each of these we refer to as a panel. And you can see that we have moved these panels around a little bit. So it starts from the more interesting stuff like the building type and the location. And then the project details and sub-project details have been moved further down. And earlier, when we had to save our file, we had a lot of fields that we were required to fill out before we could save the file. So we have reduced that number of fields that you have to save as well, so that you can get going with your project, and you only need to save those fields when you're ready to register the project. So looking at building types, as you can see here, we have two types now, two fields. One is the primary building type and then a subtype under it. So right now I'm in apartments, but if I go to the drop-down menu here, I have a choice of looking at, retail or office buildings or even mixed use would be available from this drop-down menu. Because the app is heavier because of the extra features, it does take some time to load. So please be patient with us. We are working on making it faster, making different changes to make it faster. And you can see from the map that the app is now available in all over the world. So you would choose your building type here. You would choose a subtype here. You can choose your location and the city. And if you go to the location dropdown, you'll see that you have every country in the world listed there. Then moving down to the building data, and I'm only going to highlight some of the new features, assuming that you're all Edge experts and are familiar with the older versions of Edge. So highlighting some of the new features, I specifically picked the apartment building type because that's a very popular building type that's used for Edge certification. And an exciting feature that we've added to the apartment building type is that for up to 15 unit types, you can now model them in the same file. So you simply need to select multiple topologies, and this is actually the default, multiple topologies under building data. You do have a choice of modeling single topology from this dropdown, but for now I'm going to stick to the multiple topologies because that's the more typical condition. So you would put some high-level data here about your building, the total number of floors above and below grade, floor to floor height, and this applies to the whole building. Similarly, the roof area applies to the whole building. And then to put in your information about the multiple typologies, it tells you to enter the detailed typology inputs from the menu on the right. So I go to my menu, and it gives me this option. So I encourage you to explore this option in all parts of Edge. When you go to these three dots on the right, it gives you a lot more options in all parts of Edge now. So here, it takes me to my multiple topologies menu. And I've already pre-filled this for the demo today, but you would simply, say what your home or apartment name is. So here I have 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. number of bedrooms, the area per unit, number of similar units in the building, and then the occupancy. And then you can also say the areas for each apartment type within the same table. If you needed to add another type, you would simply say add new typology and fill another row. So it's really simple compared to creating a new sub-project. And when you're done, you say insert. So right now, of course, it's giving me the error that I haven't completed this input. So I'm going to get out of that. And I say insert. And now, when I go to my interface, I see this multiple typologies option here, which when I expand, it shows me my inputs. So here, right here, you have all of your sub-projects in one place. So that's an exciting development in version 3. Then similarly, if you go to the next area where we used to have the space types, space areas broken out, you'll see that you have your usual bedroom, kitchen, etc. But what you have here in addition is that if I go to my menu options again, I have something called the detailed loads input. So this is a new feature in version 3, where you can actually room by room tell Edge whether that room has both heating and cooling, only heating, or no conditioning provided or required. So I could, for example, say that my kitchen only has cooling and no heating, or similarly, like my living room has both heating and cooling. You could even change the set points if you wanted to, and you could specify what your loads are. Like if you have some unusual loads, you could specify that. You could also specify the loads from people. All these inputs are also available in Edge by default. So if you're not comfortable with any of this, you don't have to input it. Edge will automatically do this for you. But if you want to do more detailed inputs, now you have that option. It also gives you some insight into what's happening at the back end of Edge, because this is all inputs that were being modeled at the back end of Edge. So moving on to the next section, building dimensions. So we used to have two options for putting building dimensions. One was a plain rectangle, and then you could also do it by 8 different directions. So now we've simplified it so that you can just simply put in your building dimensions in one screen. What's new here is that we have also added this option where you can specify what out of all those facade areas. So let's say you have your 4 directions, north, east, south, and west. For the others, you can make the value 0. And this is something that, it's important to keep in mind. This has not changed from the last time, but sometimes users don't seem to notice that if you don't input anything here, it doesn't mean that your east side is 0. It's actually Edge is going to use the default input. So you must check what the default inputs are and then put the right inputs that match your building. So let's say northeast is 0, but you have north, east, southeast, etc. If you want to edit that, you can. And then you can tell Edge which of these sides, which of these facades, the building sides, are exposed to outside air, which means, like a typical exterior wall is exposed to outside air. So the default is 100%. But if you had a building that was sharing a wall with another building, which happens a lot in urban environments, you wouldn't have the same type of heat loss from that wall. So now in Edge, you can tell Edge that even though my building dimensions are, X, Y, Z, whatever the building dimensions are, that part tells Edge what is the shape of the building and what is the volume of air that's being air conditioned. And then this part, the area exposed to outside air, tells EDGE which of these walls are exposed to the outside temperatures and which ones are not. So you can get a more accurate picture of the heat loss through your building. So I'll move on to the next panel now. Under the building HVAC system, we have some really exciting developments. So your default here is simplified inputs. When you first come to EDGE, this is what you see. You see simplified inputs, and like before, you can tell EDGE whether you have an AC system or not, and whether you have a space heating system or not. This has not changed. What is new is that now you can also tell EDGE whether you're using district heating, which, you know, in many urban areas is, especially in cold climates, is quite common. And then you can also say if you have district cooling or if you have both district heating and cooling. Then this is something we refer to in the slides, and this is also exciting, but you can go to your detailed inputs, and now you can tell EDGE which months of the year you have heating and cooling. So for example, cooling period, January, I can say no cooling in January, no cooling in Feb or March. Starting in April, yes, I have cooling. And then I can, you know, continue that May to August, and then I can say November, starting November, December, I have no cooling. Similarly, for heating, you can specify which is your heating periods between January and December. So that way, if you live in a place, or if your project is in a place where the heating system is turned off for certain months of the year, EDGE won't calculate those heating hours even for part of the months. So that gives you a much more clear picture of what's going on. Then under fuel usage, you know, this is quite familiar. This is, you know, you specify your fuels that are used for different end users, and you have your electricity and different fuel prices. And finally, under climate data, we have quite a few new things. You have your, you know, rainfall and elevation. Some of it is familiar. You have your latitude. You can also specify which ASHRAE climate zone you are in. ASHRAE is the American Society for Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning. E is for engineers. So this is their society. And a lot of the backend HVAC inputs in EDGE are based on the ASHRAE 90.1 standards. So many of you must be familiar with it. Now, in addition to temperature that we had before, the monthly temperatures, we've also added relative humidity and wind speed. And in the temperatures, you'll notice a significant change, which actually gives you much more accurate results for your heating and cooling. And that change is coming from your, instead of monthly averages, now you have monthly max and monthly minimum temperatures. So this gives you the actual high and the low within a certain month, which much more accurately predicts heating and cooling usage. And like I mentioned, you can also do relative humidity and wind speed. So this is all of the, you know, the key highlights, and you'll discover other things as you start using the app. On the design tab. Now, moving on to the energy, water, and materials tabs, what I've done here is I've highlighted the measures that have changed. So for example, you know, the beginning few measures are familiar. So skipping over those, we now have a new measure for insulation of the ground slab, which was missing in EDGE before. So in really cold climates, you can use this measure. And then we have a separate measure for the green roof. We always had to figure out a way, alternate way to model the green roof earlier. So now you have a green roof measure. And we'll be producing, you know, the inputs. Some of these inputs are not familiar to everybody. So we will have this information in the updated user guide that will be released soon. It's not yet released. Then you have another measure for air infiltration of envelope. And one thing I'd like to point out here is that in many of these new measures, you're used to seeing this upload documents, but in the new interface, the new version 3, you now have another new feature called detailed entry, which was not present before. So this is similar to a calculator, but instead of a calculator, it just gives you options to put in more detailed input. So for example, this is a good example of that. In your cooling system, in homes, we used to have just 1 or 2 cooling systems available. Now, when you come to your cooling system input, and actually this is a great place to highlight what Omid mentioned in the presentation also, that you now have your base case. For every measure, you can see when you select the measure, you can see what is the base case for that measure in EDGE. So here, the base case is the package system, package terminal heat pump with a COP of 3.6. And when you go to your cooling system for your building, you have a long list of systems you can select from. So not only do we have a long list of systems available here, in addition, you can go to the detailed entry.
Smita, quick time check.
Yeah.
We have another 3 to 4 minutes.
Yeah, I should be done in a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
So here you have, you can choose one cooling system. You can say what its capacity is and the other inputs for it. But you can also specify more than one cooling system and provide the same kind of inputs for that cooling system. So that gives you a lot of flexibility. We see this sometimes in hospitals and buildings like that, where you have multiple types of cooling systems. You could also see this in multifamily apartments where you have one system for the common areas and a different system for the apartments themselves. So you can do that now. Then there are other new measures like room heating controls with thermostatic valves, economizers, sub-meters for heating and cooling, power factor corrections. Just one quick note here, we are working on the colors of this. So in a few days, you'll see this looking slightly different and hopefully nicer. In the water page, I've highlighted, efficient water closets for 6 liters and 3 liter flush. So that's your dual flush closet. And when you go here, you can also see, like in homes, you have more measures that were not available in homes, like pre-rinse valve for kitchen, swimming pool covers, wastewater treatment and recycling. Here we've combined gray and black water recycling. So that's why it looks like this now. And then in materials, these are familiar floor slab roof construction. But what you'll notice is that we've taken away the entry for the steel content because that fell into the structural piece, and we did not want people to be trying to be efficient in steel. So we took that away. You will also see that you can see the incremental cost here now, and which you can update. So we have a default and you can update with your own. So that's true floor, roof, and exterior walls, familiar measures. And then we have a new measure for window frames. So now you can say, I have 50% timber, and then I have another 50% aluminum frame. And then another new measure is the floor insulation. So, those are some of the new measures. And again, when you go to these options, you might find new things, not in this case, but in many of the energy and water measures, you'll see new options. So that's all I have for the demo. I'll stop sharing my screen now. And Lakshmi, would you like to take over the controls?
Sure. Let me start share my screen. Thank you, Smita, for having included having version 3 in just 20 minutes. There is a lot more to version 3. You can explore it yourself, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any feedbacks. Over to you, Omid.
Thank you, Lakshmi and Smita. Perfect. So what I wanted to say in conclusion is that, what are we expecting from you as our edge experts? Now that we built the edge expert and version 3 and released it, my suggestion is that if you don't mind to start working on version 3 and testing it and see how it works. And create new projects in version 3. Maybe you can compare it with your older projects on version 2. Smita, can you mute your phone, please?
Sure.
Thanks. And then you can also test against those 2.1 projects, but also it would be quite educational for you to see, for example, if you used to get 30% saving on a project, what kind of percentage you are now getting on version 3. Version 3 also has new measures, basically enabling you to then, improve your savings. If, for example, you are not getting much saving on lighting, maybe you can use infiltration or floor insulation or other measures to improve your savings. And if you find any feedback, anything that you want to provide to us, believe that this is your own tool, this is your own space, and you can always reach out to us on edge@ifc.org. You can ask questions, you can send your comments there. Also, please encourage your clients to register with 2.1 projects sooner, because once Edge version 3 becomes the default, then they cannot go back and register with 2.1. Mainly for clients that they have multiple projects and they want to, take advantage of using 2.1, there would be a couple of months only for them to register with 2.1. So it's important for you to advise your clients if they want to use 2.1, it's time. And by registration, they don't need to pay for the certification fees. They can only pay for registration fee. Once it's registered, then they lock in version 2 for next 5 years. And then pass on the news to your network, whoever you're working with, either you're working with clients, working with banks, working with the government agencies, or you're working with universities and students. Please encourage them to use version 3. As you know, we mentioned that version 3 is available to all countries, so you can also test projects in Japan, projects in Australia, projects in US, UK, everywhere. So Edge is now becoming a tool for all countries globally. All right, so I stop here and we open the floor for questions and answers. Please post your questions on Q&A, and we would be more than happy to respond to any questions or any clarifications you need from us. Thank you.
All right. We have already started receiving some of the questions. As a host, some of you have reached out to me privately with your questions, and some of the questions are specifically posted on Q&A section on the WebEx. Let me go through the ones that we have on chat, and then I'll go through the questions that we have on Q&A. Many of you have been asking if we'll share the presentation with you. Please do not worry, we'll share the presentation via email along with the recording of this session. So you have access to the resources that we have in this meeting. Budianto is asking, what is the difference between multiple typologies and sub-projects? Smita, would you like to answer this question?
Sure. So sub-projects are, very useful when you're trying to do let's say, a large project that has one office building, a retail building, and you want to model each of the buildings individually so that you can get more accurate results. Sub-projects are also useful when you have, let's say, a portfolio of buildings and you want to call, and when I say portfolio of buildings, I mean, let's say you have a retail chain with similar stores across different parts of a country or across the world. You can call your entire retail chain a project, and then you can have each of your locations as a sub-project. The multiple typologies option only applies to apartments where you have a single building with many types of apartments and you want to model all of them in the same building type. So it just saves you the trouble of creating sub-projects for a single building.
Thank you, Smita. There was another question about multiple typologies. Would multiple typologies apply for any other building type other than housing? The multiple typologies are specifically introduced for homes and apartments. It's not applicable for other building types. And let me go through. Budianto is asking another question. For a tropical country like Indonesia, the option about district heating only, it doesn't apply, isn't it? Smita, do you want to answer about district heating and district cooling options that we have?
Sure. So sorry, I was writing an answer to an online question. Would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. For the question is from Budianto. He's asking if for a tropical country like Indonesia, the option that we have, which says district heating only, it does not apply, isn't it? So do you want to elaborate district heating and district cooling options that we have?
Sure. So, I mean, it's an option. It is available if you have district heating or district cooling. If you do not have it, you can say no district heating or district cooling. That is also an option. So we usually see district heating in very cold places like Mongolia or in Europe. And we see district cooling in some more advanced campus-like environments where they have a central chiller that's serving more than one building. So it's definitely not a common scenario. So by default, you can just say no district heating or cooling.
All right, thank you. So there are a couple of questions around. There seems to be a lot of options available for the users to enter for version 3. For example, if I do not know about ASHRAE climate zone, or if I do not know some of the details, can I leave the defaults? Omid, do you want to answer this question?
Sure. Yes. So those defaults are built because we collect that data and we share that data as defaults. And there's no need for you to update them unless there's a specific reason for you want to update them. But in a normal project, we are not seeing the need for updating those elements like ASHRAE baseline or elements like that. They are the defaults, but we are making them visible to the user, so there's more transparency.
There are a lot of new measures in the current version. Will there be another workshop explaining how to develop or maybe how to design a project using the new measures in version 3? Omid, would you like to take the question?
Yes, we would be happy to continue. If you feel that we want, maybe what I suggest is that you can look into version 3 and then tell us what you require, what you want from us to do. If you want us to have a specific session and discuss measures in detail, one by one, we would be happy to do that, maybe a longer session and go through all the measures one by one and explain how the detail entry works for each of the measures. We would be happy to do that. Also, the user guide is under development, and we would be having the user guide. And we are hoping that we continue building short videos. You probably have seen some of our short videos on the YouTube that explain how different things work. And we are hoping that we stopped doing it for version 2 because we were developing version 3. And now is a good time for us to start making those videos for version 3 as well.
Sure. There is a question from Ramon Abira. How do we model townhomes? Are they considered apartments?
So townhomes, actually townhomes can be modeled as homes. That's fine. Depending on how you look at a townhome. For example, if it is a townhome that is a single family, but they have shared walls, you can model them as homes. And if you saw on the design page, there is a place that you can say which one of your facades are exposed. And that's really helpful in a sense that you can say, for example, I have 2 walls that are shared with neighbor. In that sense, you say I have 0 exposure. And that will create your townhome condition. And if you have multiple units in one home, then I would use the apartments. But you can say it's 2 stories, 3-story apartment with this number of units in the townhomes.
Sure. The following question along the lines is, what about churches and temples? How do we model religious places on Edge?
So for religious places, we have places of worship on the educational buildings. And you can use that, or you can use a mixed-use typology. And under the mixed-use, what you would have access to, you would have access to all room types in all buildings, building types, right? For example, there's a room type of places of worship. You can bring that, and maybe the church or temple or mosque would have a small office. You can add the office. Maybe it has a room for the person that lives there. You can add a piece of house there. You can add toilets, showers, whatever you want. You can create that building type. With the same logic, you can start building other building types that are not normal under the mixed use. Under the mixed use, you can create different typologies. But also version 3 enables us in future to create more building typologies much more easier. In version 2, we didn't have that capability, but now in version 3, going forward, we would be much easier for us to add new typologies as we go.
Sure. There is a question about materials. Do we have more types of materials now compared to version 2.1?
More materials under the materials section?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. The current condition, we have the same level of materials. We don't have extra materials, but we are doing a study right now on the embodied carbon of materials. And we want to change the embodied energy to embodied carbon of materials, and that would then enable us to have zero carbon buildings that also include carbon of materials. We are also adding carbon from refrigerants or emissions from refrigerants as well. And that will enable us to have much comprehensive carbon calculation of buildings. So those are the elements that we are working on the materials and the carbon emission as well.
Sure. So the next question is from Vianto. when version 3 is launched, will it affect projects that are still running in the previous version? Avianto, we've explained in the beginning of the session the specific timelines. When version 3 launches, then when the registrations are available, by March 2021, we'll enable registrations and certifications for version 3. Then in July 2021, we'll make version 3 as the default version. Then tentatively by September 2021, all new registrations will happen in version 3. So the projects that are registered in version 2 or 2.1, they'll have until December 2025 to achieve final edge certification. If they cannot achieve final edge certification, they'll need to move to version 3 for certification.
I just want to quickly mention that there are many questions in the chat window that we have answered. There's not enough time to read all of them out loud for those on the phone, but what we can do is we can make a copy of this available to everybody later.
Yes, thank you for that, Smita. Yes, there are too many questions and we only have another 3 minutes.
So Lakshmi, the question that was asked in terms of whether version 3 will impact version 2 projects, we should say that no, there would be no impact on any of version 2 projects. So if you have any project in the pipeline, you're either saved or you're in the certification process, that project will not be impacted at all.
Yes, definitely. And there's another question from Sandra. When will the user guide for version 3 be available? Smita, do you want to answer?
Sure. So version 3 guide is being updated in tandem with the app. And because the app is still in beta phase, we are adding more calculators. We are even adding more measures. So, and we are collecting feedback and constantly working on updating the app. So every 2 weeks when you go in, you'll see something different. So we will release the user guide at the same time as when we are releasing the somewhat final version 3, so which would be in March, hopefully.
Thank you, Smita.
Sure.
I'm going through the questions. Give me a second. There's a question from Reynaldo. In your note, indicate December 2025 is the final date to achieve final edge certification, but large projects actually are in design, could be out that dates. If the project already has the pre-certification, can maintain version 2.1 in EDGE app. Omid, do you want to elaborate? The deadline
that would be depending on the, let's say in early 2025, if there are projects that they are still in progress, they need to write to us. And if we see that there are projects, we may grandfather those projects or grant them a specific condition to continue. But for majority of projects, we want those projects to close before 2025. So that by that time, we want everyone to be in version 3. And by that time, we would have version 4 starting to come as well.
All right. With that note, I'd like to thank everyone who has attended today's session. The webinar recording will be posted and sent to you. The link will be sent to you via email so that you can access the recording. We'll also share the PPT via the email after the session. Thank you all for attending. Omid, any closing thoughts?
I want to thank the panelists as well as the participants. We will continue to work together. Thank you so much, and wish you having a great year this year, and much more productive together on Edge. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Have a good day.
All right, thank you all.